So I was recently down the rabbit hole that is YouTube, pun intended, when I heard about this film called Little Oddick, or Greedy Guts. Since I'm all about weird stop-motion movies, I went on a hunt to see if I could watch it online, and in my travels, I came across this. What do you call this? Genius? An abomination? We all know that the story of Alice in Wonderland is a weird, surreal experience for most people. I loved Alice in Wonderland ever since I watched Hallmark's version, which, until now, has been my favorite interpretation of the story. Some may find it boring, but I, however, find and love how dryly British it is.
The Duchess, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet.
From the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet.
An invitation to play croquet from the Queen for the Duchess.
I've got the gist.
You sure?
Also, I may or may not be a bit attracted to a certain playing card with a lisp but that's neither here nor there.
Tis, miss. This tree ought by rights to have been a red rose tree, and we planted a white one by mistake.
Easy thing to do!
And Martin Short is the Mad Hatter. I love you, Martin. You's my favorite.
Oh, then that's my case. Well, there.
This one might be a runner-up for my favoritism because it is so freaking weird. Some Czech guy known as Jan Švankmajer, also known as the godfather of surrealism, looked at Alice in Wonderland and said, "Hey, why don't we make this narrative dark, threatening, and use lots of animal corpses?" In most forms of Alice in Wonderland, the madness of the characters is treated like something whimsical and wacky. This may be the first time I've seen it shown as something dangerous. Like, I'm not joking. Just look at these guys. It's like the kid from Toy Story decided to move up from toys to dead animals. Just give him a few years. His artist medium is going to be human remains next. But by far the worst of the lot is the White Rabbit, who I would never have described as an antagonist until I watched this film. Just look at him. Just look at this. His face! I can't decide if it's the eyes or the gross bared teeth. He just looks horrifying, and not only does he look like a nightmare, he spends the majority of his time on screen with these huge scissors that he uses to cut other characters' heads off like some kind of slasher villain. Considering that the game Clock Tower came out in 1995 and the scissorman kind of looks like the rabbit, I'm going to assume they pulled some inspiration from here. I have no idea why this Alice decides to follow him instead of calling an exorcist, but it's only when she discovers the corpses of other animals hanging in his wardrobe that she decides to fear him. Because watching him eat sawdust and sew himself back together wasn't enough. He straight up climbs a ladder and attempts to saw her arm off. The whole bit where Alice is stuck in the house is probably one of the more comedic scenes in the Hallmark version.
Careful, Bill! There's a loose slate up there somewhere! Good man! You found it! Dad, tell him to climb down the chimney. Bill! Ow! Climb down the chimney!
But in this one, the rabbit isn't just stupid, he's psychopathic. There's even this scene where he's chasing her that's straight out from The Shining.
Here's Johnny.
It doesn't help that not only in real life, but in the movie, he is literally a stuffed corpse of a rabbit. Alice in Zombieland much? In the English dub, it's literally the same girl voicing everything, which weirdly enough makes it a little less creepy, despite what people say about little girls in movies. When the rabbit talks, I'm not that unnerved, but if you watch it in its original language, he sounds horrifying. There isn't a lot of talking though. This film is nearly void of dialogue. It honestly doesn't need it. There's even a version where the musical score, which is even more distressing. There's even a version without the musical score, which is even more distressing. This film makes such bizarre and threatening choices in its imagery, like this rat, that I'm pretty sure is a corpse too, which actually has a funny scene where he climbs up on Alice's head and Alice is all okay with him until he lights a campfire. Then, much later in the film, you can see him very much dead in a mousetrap. There's also the fact that everything Alice picks up or tries to eat has nails or bugs in it, aside from the stuff that makes her grow or shrink, which looks normal enough, except instead of juice she drinks a bottle of ink. Also, something to note is there's this desk and drawer that seems to be a constant catalyst in the film. It's how the rabbit gets to Wonderland, and it gives Alice the objects she needs, except it's kind of a jerk about it, because it always has her fall on her ass if she tries to open it. But it's because this Alice doesn't take any crap that she is able to get what she needs. Our girl literally pries it open with a knife at some point. I think more disturbingly is how this film sets up what we already know in the first scene. This is all in Alice's head. We know this because it at first shows Alice with an adult by a river, throwing rocks into the water. Cut to Alice in her room with 2 dolls that resemble her and her companion, and Alice is throwing rocks into a cup of tea. This movie has a very dark, dreary, dull atmosphere, which is almost colorless, even though the characters are wearing pink or blue or red. It's just so dismal looking. It also gives a very lonely, claustrophobic feel with how things are shot or how sets are made. Wonderland is not an open map any longer. It all takes place in this deteriorating, rotting building, and each room is a different stage for a new nightmare. I'm not going to tell you every choice this movie makes, because I feel part of the experience would be ruined if I tell you how characters are presented or how things transition. But let's just say this film is an absolute treat for those who are into the weird and macabre, like me. It's definitely better than Tim Burton's version, at any rate. Did I mention this film was probably meant for kids? But then, the 80s didn't really mind giving its children nightmares. For anyone interested in giving this film a watch themselves or learning more about Jan Švankmajer, whose name I am probably butchering, then there will be links down below. I'll also link to the Hallmark Alice in Wonderland as well because I like it, so there. Thanks for listening to me ramble about another movie. Stay safe out there, y'all. Don't get your head cut off. I'm serious.